So now it's time to enter the exciting world of 3D. After Effects allows you to transform and animate your layers within a 3D environment. Up till now, we've only been using 2D. This adds some complexity to your animations and also some depth. Now in CS6, you also have options for curving or extruding layers and adding reflections and environments. And we'll have a look at those a bit later. But to start with, let's just get our head round how to control layers using multiple views, the camera tools, and the axis modes. So if you want to follow along, open 3D Layers AEP, and we're in O2 3D Start Comp, and in here you'll notice that I have several layers. I have a background layer, I have a floor layer, which is just a solid, and then I have my little hip-hop girl dancers, which are keyed video footage, and I've parented them to a controller, which is a null, which I can use just to move them around as a group. And I also have my little drop shadow logo in there. So I'm going to create a 3D environment from this. So the first thing we're going to do is have a look at the views. First of all, we have our active camera view pop-up, which is our 3D view pop-up, and it allows us to choose from different orthographic views which are fixed at the front, left, top, back, right and bottom. We also have custom views which allow us to move around in a custom view, enabling us to see our scene from different angles, and we'll see that in action in a minute. Next to that, we have this menu here, which is the Select View Layout. Now, when I'm working in 3D, I generally want to have two views open, at least, so that I can see two separate views of my scene. Now, that takes up a bit of space, so what I recommend doing is just closing a few of these palettes, just to give yourself a bit of room. Now, I've actually created a new workspace called the 3D workspace. You can do that too by clicking on New Workspace and giving it a name. So I'm just going to select my 3D workspace, which gives me a bit more space for my multiple views. And then what I'm going to do is start making my layers 3D. So let's start with our dancers. Let's make them 3D. Now at the moment, in our active camera view, you see nothing change. And in fact, in this view, we're not seeing anything change. And that's because if we have a look at this view, notice the yellow corners on the edge of this panel here. That means that's the active view. And if I now go down to my Fast Previews menu, I can choose how to display that. And at the moment, it's displaying it at Fast Draft. I could also choose Adaptive Resolution, which gives me a slightly higher quality render than Fast Draft, and we'll switch between these a little bit later. In this view, however, if I select this view, notice it's highlighted by the yellow corners, and then I can choose a different preview mode, if you like, in this window than from the other window, and it's defaulting to wireframe. I'm going to change that to Fast Draft, because I want to actually see my layers in this view. Now, if we want to actually see our layers, we can select the layers and go up to View, Look at Selected Layers, and that will focus on our layers in this right view. Now, the right view is not showing us much, it's just showing us the layers from the right, and because they're flat layers, we can't see much detail. In order to see more detail, I usually switch to the Custom View, and that allows me to see my layers, if I switch on my transparency grid, in 3D space. Now, I can also select my camera tool, which is this one here. I have the Unified Camera tool, which gives me three other tools in one. The Orbit Camera tool, Track XY Camera tool, and Track Z Camera tool. You can select these in isolation. The Orbit Camera tool will allow you to move around the scene. Now, this is a non-rendering scene, so it's just allowing you to look at your layers from different angles without affecting your final output. The next one in the list is Track XY, and that allows you to move the scene up and down. And then the third final one is Track Z, and that allows you to get closer to your scene or further from your scene. Now, if you switch to the Unified Camera tool and the C key toggles between the three, you can use your right mouse button to orbit, you can use your middle mouse button to track XY, and you can use your right mouse button to track Z. And that's a really nice way of being able to control your views. So let's add some other elements to our 3D scene. Let's put this one into our 3D scene. and also the floor into our 3D scene. Now you'll notice what's happening here. Because we're in draft mode, we're not really seeing things intersect properly. We're seeing quite a strange rendering. If you switch to adaptive resolution, you should see that render a little bit better. And basically what's happening is, because of the stacking order in the composition, we're seeing the hip hop girls on top of the floor layer, which is on top of this background layer. Okay, we're also going to add our drop shadow layer, so let's add that in, and let's make our dancers controller 3D too. So we're now in a 3D scene. Now you'll notice that as I move around, that's dropping resolution in order to show me it moving in real time. Now the benefit of working at adaptive resolution is we see the layer stacking order correctly and intersections correctly, but we don't really want to see it dropping to 1/8 of quality every time we move. So if we go to fast draft, we may not have the intersections that we have with adaptive resolution, and we get this flickering happening when the layers are on top of each other, but it allows us to move through a little bit more quickly. Now you'll notice that we are getting problems with the display when we move around, and this will happen depending on which graphics card you have. You may get these like OpenGL glitches as you move around your scene. But what you'll notice is once I start to move these layers in 3D space and separate them, those problems tend to go away. So what I'm going to do is open up the position property of this layer now, and you'll notice that we have 3 values, X, Y, and Z. So I can move things from side to side and up and down using X and Y as I could before. But I can now move things in 3D space using a Z value. Now I'm going to switch off my floor layer so you can see this happening. And you'll see that now I can push that layer behind my characters. Okay, and I'm no longer getting the problems with the intersecting layers that I was having before. Now the floor layer is in there as well, but what we're going to do is actually rotate this so it forms a floor. So I'm going to open up the rotation property, and you'll notice for rotation we now have 4 values. We have orientation, which has an X, Y, and Z value, and we have X rotation, Y rotation, and Z rotation. I usually use orientation to set up the initial rotation of my layers. So I'm just going to use that to rotate this layer round by 90 degrees. So let's just type in 90. And you'll notice I have a mask on that layer as well. So that layer is now forming the ground of my scene, and we can use the orbit tool to have a look at that, and you'll see that it's really starting to look more like a 3D scene now. There's my characters dancing on the floor with my shape layers playing in the background.